Greetings, and welcome to A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. For this project, we are using the Ivan Walters reference book of 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Each day, we watch a movie associated with the date we are watching it on. Alright, and as it is the 2nd of April, we are going to be watching Presumed Innocent from 1990, directed by Alan J. Pakula and starring Harrison Ford. And as I mentioned several times before, this is at a time in the 90s when Harrison Ford was the name to go see. Being a fan of his since a very young age of mine, anything that I was able to see with him in it was fantastic. Now, while I didn't originally see this movie in the theaters, I did eventually see it when it first came to home video or something around that, because I do remember seeing it early after its release. And also to take note before we go any further that this is actually, of this list so far, the third Harrison Ford film, only to be equal to Anthony Hopkins, who also has had 3 movies on this list so far. And that being said, like I had mentioned, not only does this movie star Harrison Ford, but it also stars Brian Dennehy, Raul Julia, Bonnie Bedelia, Paul Winfield, Greta Scacchi, and John Spencer. So we're dealing with a man who gets involved with solving the murder case of a colleague who was a former affair and sort of conflict of interest. Things snowball. The investigating powers to be decide to put their attention towards him being the killer, so he now has to defend himself against the accusations, and one thing after another leads into this great, fantastic courtroom drama. This is a great look at a murder mystery from a certain point of view, from a point that you don't get to see very much, which is kind of cool. We actually get to see someone trying to work on the actual case and then have to defend themselves against the evidence that's piling up against them. And it just we're dealing with a fantastic cast. Again, we're dealing with a 90s movie where we are pumping on all cylinders for our cast. Just the names alone that I just listed are even just a segment of what is actually fantastic appearances by almost everyone. And we have such a great dramatic piece playing out. And one of the cool things about seeing this movie on multiple turns, when you get to sit down and rewatch it at least for the second time, you can see all the looks and stuff that you can see from a different angle now that you know how the movie turns out. And it's just a fantastic watch and just a perfect example of this type of explanation of what a blockbuster movie actually is. So we follow prosecutor Rosette Sabich, who's affectionately known as Rusty, which is Harrison Ford, as he basically starts at the very beginning of this movie, showing up to work on the April 2nd, 1990, where he learns that his colleague, Caroline, who is Greta Scacchi, has been found raped and murdered from the previous night. And that is about 2 minutes into this 2-hour and 7-minute movie. It isn't actually until we get to the actual court sequence when we learn the date of her death, so we don't actually know it actually is the 2nd at the very beginning of the movie until partially into the movie, but technically beginning of the movie is where we are in April the 2nd. And as it is April 3rd, we are going to be watching A Passage to India from 1984, directed by David Lean and starring Judy Davis. So this is one of those movies that while I had no interest in seeing it at the time, I did understand its cultural significance just for being dealing with subject matters that it did at the time that it did, and how it was a big showing at a lot of the awards during the year that it was released. And unfortunately, it was not until this moment that I actually had watched this movie. So as I had previously mentioned, not only does this movie star Judy Davis, but it also stars Peggy Ashcroft, Victor Banerjee, James Fox, Alec Guinness, and Nigel Havers. So this is a very big epic movie that goes a long time to point out a bunch of different classes during the 1920s in India, specifically centered around the English that have settled in India, there is a lot of deep-seated racial underlines to a lot of the performances in this particular movie. We are introduced by both Adelia Quested and Mrs. Moore, who are played by Judy Davis and Peggy Ashcroft, as not being racist at all compared to the others that are they are visiting, the English that they are visiting in India. Their fascination with wanting to know the more culture and all that is definitely the reason why they become welcome to a handful of others that are currently obviously Indians living in the area. And we end up with a very difficult at times to deal with the experience of witnessing the racial injustices that go on, even between other Indians, those that are basically working for the English in the area against their fellow man. And it's kind of difficult to take it sometimes. We get to see a lot of fantastic visuals that you don't really, at that time, you probably wouldn't have seen very much from a Western style movie. The movie primarily being filmed in India itself. And we get to see some fantastic British actors acting their British best and all that. We have a lot of native Indian actors fulfilling these roles perfectly. We do have Sir Alec Guinness doing a little bit of brown face in this particular movie. But again, it's something that actually seems as more of a going after an actor to portray this role than a gimmick. He definitely plays it honestly and with full conviction to the role itself. And it's on April 3rd of 1924 that during a garden party where Delia meets Mr. Fielding, who is the director of the local English school. He then invites her and Mrs. Moore to meet with Dr. Aziz and Professor Goodbull, played by Victor Janerjee and Alec Guinness. And this is about 27 minutes into this 2-hour and 44-minute movie. And like I had mentioned earlier, this movie got a lot of accolades for the Academy Awards that particular year, winning for Best Supporting Actress for Peggy Ashcroft and Best Original Score. It also got nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress for Judy Davis, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, Best Film Editing, and Best Sound. And as it is the 4th of April, we are going to be watching 1984 from 1984, directed by Michael Radford and starring John Hurt. So to begin with, this is probably one of the first movies that I can remember seeing that when I originally saw it, knowing that it was based on previously existed material, as in the George Orwell novel, that I actively went in to find the source material and actually read it for myself. This was a movie that I obviously did not see when it first came out. It was definitely an R-rated movie at the time of its release, and I'm pretty sure that I did watch it on one of those movie networks that we had in Canada at the time that was like equal to HBO. Either it was a Super Channel or First Choice, one of those two. However, when it came to watching this movie, I probably have only watched it the one time, so this would be my second viewing for this project. And like I had previously stated, not only does this movie star John Hurt, but it also stars Richard Burton, Susan Hamilton, Cyril Cusack, James Walker, George Fisher, Andrew Wilde, Corina Seddon, and John Boswell. So without a doubt, this is a very bleak movie. And of course, its source material is very bleak to begin with. And we deal with a ultra dystopian future. We're dealing, being the UK has been overrun by communism some time ago. So we're dealing with alternate universe sort of deals. But it's so bleak, but so wonderfully done. Now, upon my first viewing of the movie, I was kind of lost at a lot of the stuff. After reading the novel, a lot of the stuff became a lot more clearer, and then after witnessing it a second time, it's all like, okay, this movie definitely hits home on all the main markers of the original story. There are a lot of things that are left to the side, which is understandable because it's a very involving story from a single person point of view, which is almost exactly what we have in this. John Hurt is almost in every single shot of this movie, as the original story is from the point of view of the protagonist of Wilson Smith. And again, having to refer to the source material as we see it on the screen, it's actually for what they choose to put in is very loyal to the original Orwell story. It has fantastic visuals that are so gray and bleak, whereas when we have sequences of color, they're so vibrant and alive, which is exactly what they're supposed to be. We have some fantastic acting. We have a fair bit of unsettling situations that almost reflect not only modern day sort of feeling, but it's just weird to have to watch this movie again in our current climate. Not only that, but we're also dealing with certain sort of historical points in movie history, because this is actually Richard Burton's final film. There's a dedication to him at the end of the film. And again, the parallels with government monitoring and propaganda being so full forward in this movie, you can't help but reflect on, again, like I said, the modern day situation that the world is going through right now. This, unfortunately, is probably the only type of movie that I can suggest to someone that would be curious about the Orwellian story and how they put it onto the big screen. I really can't say, hey, here's a fun movie to see, because it's definitely not a fun movie. It's a very fascinating movie, and if you enjoy John Hurt's work, it is fantastic. He does an amazing job in this. And again, the visuals at points, the destruction of the flashback sequences that we see as Winston as a child are great. When we come to the modern day, all of the work environments are so, you can see a lot of like fascinating fantasy sort of structures and all that being played out. And again, we're dealing with just a wonderful movie that is kind of difficult to watch because of the subject matter being so unsettling. And as it is the 5th of March, we are going to be watching Ray from 2004, directed by Taylor Hitchford and starring Jamie Foxx. So this, like a bunch of other biographies prior to this on this list, were very big instrumental movies that came out at the time that they did. This one being a tribute to not only a fantastic performer, but also including quite amazing performances from all the actors. And this was definitely one that I saw in the movies when it was released. And like I had previously mentioned, not only does this movie star Jamie Foxx, but also stars Sharon Warren, Kerry Washington, Regina King, Renee Wilson, Lorenz Tate, Harry J. Lennox, and Clifton Powell. Now, the majority of this movie basically takes place during young Ray Robinson, aka Ray Charles, aka Jamie Foxx in this movie, as he sets out on his journey to become a musician. As we follow through his success, we also deal with doing either flashbacks to prior to his deciding to leave, or even younger still to his childhood, where he encounters becoming blind as well and having to deal with that with his mother, and then dealing with all sorts of racial and other stumbling blocks that he has to achieve to become the world-renowned performer that Ray Charles actually becomes. And while I gave a short little list of actors involved with this movie, every single scene has such a phenomenal grouping of actors that do fantastic performances. Now, we are definitely dealing with a mainly black cast, which is understandable under the circumstances, and everyone brings such a phenomenal A game to this movie. We just are given such amazing vision of the era that this movie takes place out in the different sequences that it does, because like I said, it jumps back and forth throughout Ray Charles's timeline, and it's just so superbly produced. It looks so amazing, and it sounds even more spectacular. Having Jamie Foxx re-recording Ray Charles's music for this movie. And at one point in our storyline, we have Ray meeting Delia B. Robinson, who is played by Kerry Washington. The two of them, like I said, meet and then actually get married, which actually happens on April 15th, 1955, which is about 57 minutes into this 2-hour and 32-minute movie. And when it came to the Oscars for that particular year, it ended up winning for Best Actor for Jamie Foxx, as well as Best Sound Mixing. It ended up getting also nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Editing, and Best Costume Design. And as it is March 6th, we are going to be watching Tess from 1979, directed by Roman Polanski and starring Natasha Kinski. To this particular point in my knowledge of Roman Polanski's movies, I am aware that he has a vast array of movies, some of which I have seen, a slight handful of them, including like Chinatown, Frantic, and one cannot forget Rosemary's Baby. This particular movie, Tess, is one that I had, first of all, no idea of its existence or what even the storyline meant. Like I already mentioned, this movie does star Natasha Kinski, but it also does star Peter Firth, Lee Lawson, John Collin, Rosemary Martin, Caroline Pickles, and Richard Pearson. So to begin with, this movie is actually based on the novel by Thomas Hardy called Tess of the Tuberculous. And it turns out to be a long tragic story of this young woman, Tess, played by Natasha Kinski, as she goes through trials and tribulations of her life in the early 1890s, from the tragic stance of her family to trying to find her way in the world, meeting up with several different suitors, not having very success in relationships, and it's a very long, drawn-out, sad tale. Like I mentioned earlier, I am aware of the vast amount of Roman Polanski movies that I definitely have not seen, but when it comes to that name, a period piece like this is something that I was not expecting it. I mean, visually looks like as realistic as it could be. All the colors are like this weird muted sort of, either that or was the version that I was watching, but it didn't seem to be as vibrant as it could have, but is understandable for the era. When we do get pops of color, it's for more richer sort of environments and whatnot. The costuming is fantastic, from not only the high-class stuff, but down to the grubby, like, poor working-class people outfits. And it's something that is interesting to see, but unfortunately, it's so dire of a story that there's no sort of feeling of uplifting, even when it does sort of seem that things are kind of sort of turning out for Tess. It just tragedy rears its ugly head, and we just carry on with this. Now, at one point, Tess and her family goes to King Beer, where the Uberville family crypt is located, which is a distant relationship to her family. And while it's not stated into the movie, according to the novel, that is actually April 6th, 1891 when this happens, and that's about 2 hours and 11 minutes into this 3-hour and 6-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular year, it ended up with wins for Best Set Decoration, Best Cinematography, and Best Costume Design, as well as being nominated for Best Director, Best Picture, and Best Original Score. And as it is the 7th of March, we are going to be watching How the West Was Won from 1962, directed by John Ford, Henry Hathaway, and George Marshall, starring Carol Baker. So this title is one of those that you heard about and seen posters of, and just seeing how big and epic the actual cast is and what it is, but I myself have never actually seen this movie before. Knowing that it's a Western, I wasn't 100% sure what the actual story was until my first viewing. So, as I just mentioned, not only does this movie star Carol Baker, but it also stars Henry Fonda, Carolyn Jones, Gregory Peck, George Peppard, Robert Preston, Debbie Reynolds, and James Stewart. So at the very base of this movie, we follow several generations as they basically try and make an existence and living throughout the what is known as the Wild West, spanning from the middle 1800s up until about the late 1800s. And the list of actors that I just recently talked about is basically just like 1/4 of the amount of recognizable either faces or voices that play throughout this very, very long movie. To begin with, this movie had something that personally I hadn't actually seen before. I mean, besides the almost 8 minutes of an introduction, we actually have an intro that plays for quite a while, and then we have opening credits, so it's not till like almost 8 minutes into this movie where the actual story begins. But that being said, visually looking, the rectangular screen that you currently watch everything on is actually even wider. It's a very, very narrow thing where it was actually the film itself was originally filmed in 3-strip cinema, is what it was called, where they actually had 3 different 35 millimeter cameras lined up next to each other to film a panoramic shot. That's kind of neat to sometimes, because when you notice a character walking from one side of the screen to the other side of the screen, it like almost warps their vision as it gets this like curved shot. So you'd be watching this in a very wide angle in a movie theater and all that. And again, the effect is quite stunning, especially when you see some very gorgeous cinematic scenes where actually there's a sequence where you have one guy talking to a bunch of other guys that are gathered around him, and these guys are like 20 people stacked side to side. You can see them all in this whole entire shot going from side to side. It's just a fascinating thing to witness. So getting back to the movie itself, this is basically 3 separate stories that they stitch together for one epic long story, and each different sequence is directed by each of our different directors that I listed. They look very and feel very cohesive, which is kind of cool to see. And again, we're dealing with some very well-known actors in each of the sequences, and everyone is just a treat to watch. While there's not much substance to the movie and it's a little bit melodramatic and kind of predictable, it's just a feast to actually watch. I mean, there's a lot of, first of all, fantastic stunts put throughout this. There's some really cool effects done. There's a really neat sequence where they use a river raft going down these rapids where we see some actual video, like footage of this actually happen. And then we have the actors on a gimbal that's submerged in water, rotating, water splashing up. And then we have a moving, like, projected video back, again, it's not video, but the image is rear projected behind them, and it's just really well put together. We have a lot of that going back and forth throughout the different sequences, and again, there's some really cool action, there's some really neat visuals, there's a lot of stunning aerial visuals, and knowing how the movie was filmed with, again, 3 separate cameras to actually witness this actually being used in a moving camera is kind of a cool thing without visible tracks or anything like that. There's like an actual dolly shot at one point where there is nothing below the camera that you can see. So the way they pulled it off was just fascinating. Like I said, it is a bit melodramatic, and it is kind of predictable what's going to happen because, again, we're dealing with a typical Western story, and again, we're dealing with the 1800s. So, I mean, it's a fascinating piece of Hollywood history. The look of this movie is what, for me personally, captures my attention for the entire run of the film. So when the Civil War starts, we have Lewis Rawlings, played by Jimmy Stewart, and his son, George Peppard, joined the U.S. Army. And then the first day of the battle, and Lewis is killed shortly after midnight of the next day. And that is on April 7th, 1862. Zeb actually stops a Southern deserter from killing General Grant. And that happens at 1 hour and 37 minutes into this 2 hour and 44-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that year, it ended up winning for Best Screenplay, Best Film Editing, and Best Sound, as well as being nominated for Best Picture, Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, Color, and Best Music. And as it is the 8th of April, we are going to be watching She's Out of My League from 2010, directed by Jim Fieldsmith and starring Jay Baruchel. So this is one of those, romantic comedies, more comedy than romantic, with a little bit of unusual sort of casting between the lead characters. The typical ugly duckling sort of teamed up with the princess sort of storyline, which I was aware as it came out, but never really got around to seeing it. I've seen several clips from this movie as they pop up on social medias from time to time, but until this particular moment, I didn't actually watch the entire film. Like I'd already mentioned, the movie does star Jay Baruchel, as well as Alice Eve, Kristen Ritter, T.J. Miller, Nate Torrance, Mike Vogel, Lindsay Sloan, Kim Shaw, Jessica Nicole, and Hayes MacArthur. So awkward late 20s sort of Kurt Kittner, who's Jay Baruchel, living in Pittsburgh, is a TSA agent, and circumstances come that his path crosses with Molly McClesh, who is Alice Eve, and situation comes about, and they end up becoming a bit of a couple, which is confusing to mostly Kurt's friends, who believe that he's hitting above his class, whereas we get the title of the story, She's Out of My League. Her being referred to as a 10 and him a 5 at best. That it's impossible for that. It's a cute little movie. The chemistry between our main characters, between Jay and Alice, is very, very endearing. However, Jay Baruchel plays the typical Jay Baruchel throughout the whole entire thing, being that awkward, nerdy sort of guy throughout the whole entire thing, which plays up perfectly to it. It's not like a laugh-a-minute sort of movie that one would hope it would be, but it's cute, it's endearing, and it's kind of, like I said, it's a different kind of romantic comedy. It reverses the usual plain girl to reveal to be a beautiful girl to, get the guy sort of thing. And of course, it gets into everyone's head, and they fall apart and come back together, and fall apart and come back together. It's just the typical sort of thing that you would expect from this type of movie. It's actually near the beginning of the movie where as a apology for having him ejected from an event that she was hosting, Molly offers Kurt a pair of tickets to see a home Pittsburgh Penguins game, and he brings along his buddy. Turns out she's there, and they have a little bit of a fun time between the two of them at this game. And the game itself happens on April 8th, 2010. And the reason we know that is they actually shot this footage during an actual Pittsburgh game, and that was the date that the footage was filmed on. Happening at about 22 minutes into this 1 hour and 44 minute movie. All right, so that's going to wrap up this particular episode, and we're going to look off to the future to see what movie we're going to see tomorrow, and that being March 9th, we're going to be watching The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly from 1966. So until next time, go see a movie. This has been A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. Please be sure to subscribe, download, comment, share, rate, and review. Once again, another thanks to Ivan Walters for his book, A Year of Movies, 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Look for it online or at your local bookstore. Follow Planet Geek Productions on all of our social media. Through Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, and Letterboxd, search for Planet Geek Productions. On X, former Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, search for Planet Geek Pod. You can also reach out to us through email at planetgeekpod@gmail.com. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, go see a movie.